Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hickson Diaries, where we talk about my life as an American living here in the UK, the culture shocks, the ins and outs of living abroad, and what life in the UK is really like. Today we're going to talk about King, Congress, and Monarch, and how my brain is unraveling it all. Grab a cup of coffee, grab your tea, whatever gets you through a long one. Mainly me, as an American living here in the UK, how I'm slowly, reluctantly, almost painfully coming to terms with the fact that maybe this whole king thing isn't as absurd as I was raised to believe. I know, but stay with me. All right, let me set the scene. I grew up in the United States, which means I grew up completely marinated in a very specific mythology. We threw off the yoke of tyranny, we rejected kings, and we built something better. The 4th of July for us isn't just about fireworks and hot dogs. It's a national ritual celebrating the idea that monarch or the monarchy is fundamentally incompatible with freedom, that they cannot go hand in hand. And look, I believed it for a really long time. I'm the daughter of a veteran who's very pro-American. Obviously, I grew up listening to all of the propaganda and the very Americanized version of history. And I believe some of it still, I have to be honest. At least, at the very least, it creeps up on me every once in a while. The idea of hereditary power, of someone being ordained by God or born into an authority, it kind of grates against something very deep inside my brain. When I met my British partner, I would, of course, completely nod politely during conversations about the royals, express my opinion, thinking that the monarch was just a figurehead and had no absolute power, had no actual integration into the government or the ruling of the country or the Commonwealth. I would watch a bit of wedding stuff here or there, but eternally, I was always thinking kind of like, why do you people still have this? The monarch actually does have, and how it works in conjunction with the parliament here. I have to admit, when I heard that King Charles was going to the United States this week to address Congress, no less, my first reaction was honestly a bit of an eye roll. I mean, here we go, a whole lot of pomp and circumstance, handshakes and photo ops, and a whole lot about this special relationship and it all being a huge performance just for cameras. And I was uneasy about it as well because of the tensions that have been going on between the US and the UK in recent months. Then I watched what actually happened. So for those of you who don't know, here's a little bit of context. The US and UK relations, as I mentioned, have been genuinely strained lately. The Iran situation, disagreements about the proper military support that should or should not be given, Trump calling Starmer a coward, mocking the Royal Navy, threatening to review U.S. support for Britain's claim to the Falklands, and also outright insulting British troops, particularly their role in Afghanistan and support of the U.S. in other conflicts. It's been rough to say the least. Into all of this chaos, King Charles III just walks right in. First British monarch to address a joint session of Congress in 35 years, since his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, did it in 1991. So he opened with jokes, calling Washington a tale of two Georges, obviously referring to George Washington and King George III. He assures the room with a smile that he was not there to reignite the Revolutionary War, which we appreciate. And in those deliveries, he completely disarms the entire room. I mean, the entire room. Then he goes to work. He praises NATO as indispensable on a day that Trump repeatedly threatens to abandon it or dismantle it. He speaks about climate change. He champions the rule of law, the certainty of stable and accessible rules, and independent judiciary, which, come on, we know is huge, lands very heavily, right? And he also called for an unyielding resolve in the defense of Ukraine, which happened to get a standing ovation, a bipartisan standing ovation, even despite the fact that the US government has been hesitant to provide more aid to Ukraine, and the president and some of his cabinet members did directly insult its leader. He spoke about valuing people of all faiths and those of none, and he warned against America becoming an ever inward looking, which is a direct counter to a lot of the America First philosophy that's running through the country right now. With every single line that he delivered, he's precise, he's calibrated, he's intentional. It's delivered with a smile to standing ovations. The United States government is being countered in its own chamber, and he gets bipartisan standing ovations and thunderous applause. The king does. A monarch does. I mean, that's incredible when you think about it. Here's the part that scrambled my brain. Trump loved it. I mean, loved it. He called the speech great. He said King Charles was a fantastic person. He seemed genuinely delighted by the entire thing. The pageantry, the ceremony, submarine bell engraved with his name on it, which was a brilliant move on the king's part. The man was being corrected, but didn't even notice that he was being corrected. And that's when something clicked for me. This is what soft power actually looks like. No sanctions, no huge press conferences, no diplomatic cables that get ignored, no worry about how this is going to play in the press. Just a king knowing who he is, walking into the lion's den, scratching the lion behind the ear, and then walking out without even a roar. Something for sure. I mean, all these European leaders and not just European leaders, Canadian, world leaders, everywhere across the globe have been trying to shift and counter Trump's rhetoric. But a monarch from the country that we literally fought and died for historically to not be a part of, offering history and pageantry, speaking from a position that's well above politics, carrying centuries of institutional weight, that gets through. Told me two things. Number one, obvious how much Trump is desperate to be a king. Desperate to be a king. And number two, the fact that the king did not have to raise his voice, say anything quirky or clever, just say what he thought in a deliberate, intentional manner using the proper language, but able to convey what he feels unapologetically and without hesitation. Statesmanship at its best, in my opinion. I don't know if it'll have any lasting effects. I mean, so far it's doing its job as of the date and time of this recording. But by the time that they got to the state dinner, at least, Trump was completely unfazed. I mean, but as a piece of diplomacy, as performance art, I mean, this was a 10, probably an 11, actually. So here's where I have to be honest with you about something. I've spent years reflexively dismissing the monarch as anarchism, as an antiquated, outdated institution that needs to go away. A constitutional quirk with a crown, I guess. But watching this week unfold, I'm starting to kind of understand something I don't think I could see before. Probably because I was blinded by my American propaganda and historical upbringing. But I've started to realize that the British system that is in place isn't a monarchy instead of a democracy. It's a monarchy combined with democracy. The king has no executive power. He doesn't make any laws. He can't veto anything that happens in parliament necessarily. He doesn't command the military in an operational sense as the way that at least that the president does as the commander-in-chief in the United States. The UK is governed by an elected parliament and a prime minister who can be voted out, just as the Congress is in the United States. But what the king does have is something that elected politicians never will. They just can't possess: a position above the daily political fray. A platform that's not contingent on winning the next election or garnering public support, although public support does play a little bit into, their role. But a voice that can speak for continuity, for shared values, for a extended view, a very, long play view of where they want the country, the kingdom, the commonwealth to go, without being accused of being partisan or combative or just trying to get clickbait in any way. When Charles stood in front of Congress and defended the rule of law, he wasn't doing it as a political figure. He was doing it as the crown, an institution that predates and will probably outlast any particular government. And weirdly, that gives the message a lot more weight than I think people give it credit for. Certainly than I gave it credit for originally. Look, I'm not saying I've become a full-throated royalist by any means. I think there's something that will always be in me that will instinctively at least reject the idea of a monarch or a king. I still have real questions about inherited privilege and the cost of maintaining the institution, about the connection with Epstein, which is huge for me, and it wasn't even touched on in any way, shape, or form. But I am saying this. There's something kind of clarifying about watching an institution that's been trained for this for centuries actually deploy the skills of diplomacy and statesmanship in a very high stakes moment. I can't help but wonder if this crown, this institution, this monarch has been kept in place to exist precisely for these moments, to say what elected politicians can't say, to walk into hostile rooms and speak uncomfortable truths wrapped in velvet so they're easily digested. I mean, that's soft power, right? That's exactly the definition. I don't know if it's exactly a definition, but it's the perceived definition. To represent something well beyond the current government and the current crisis, when you combine that with a democratic ruling body that actually holds power, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe the American founding fathers were right that we needed to reject the monarchy to build what we built. And maybe the British were also right that you can keep a symbol, a strip of the power, and end up with something useful for moments like this. I don't know. I haven't landed on anything really. I'm still kind of processing all of the events of this week that have happened, but I do know this. I watched a king stand in the United States Capitol this week and say things that no elected leader could have said, or if they could have, were too afraid to. And he said it to an audience that was captivated and actually listened. And something in my American brain shifted, like it or not, good or bad. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I don't know if you've made it this far. Thank you. You're a trooper. These deep dives are basically just me thinking out loud, trying to kind of work out my thoughts and feelings through this weird experience of being an American living abroad, watching the United States from a distance and just slowly realizing that some things I took for granted might be more complicated than I thought, and some things that I thought were true are definitely not. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. Just let me know your thoughts, especially if you're British. What are your thoughts on how America perceives the monarchy? Or if you're American, do you have any thoughts on my wait, maybe this makes sense moment? Do you have that kind of sense of at least questioning everything that we've been taught and propagandized about our whole lives? I don't know. Subscribe if you haven't. That would be great. Hit the bell, all that stuff. Definitely consider becoming a member of the Mandyverse if you can. There's information about that in the description box. And regardless, thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Welcome to the show.